Hi, everyone. Welcome to our March Housing Committee meeting. It looks like we have two guests tonight, Francesca and Sarah Yanish. Sarah, do you want to say hi?
Hi, all.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. I don't see Francesca. What's Francesca's last name?
Houston.
Oh, right.
Oh, it's under Richard.
It's under Richard. Is he
Yes.
he's my doctor.
No,
really? It's a different Houston. That's a different one.
it's a different one. They're all related, but
Okay.
Roger Houston.
Roger, that's right.
That's right. Nice
Sorry.
guy.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry.
Sarah, we have an opportunity for guests to have a 2-minute moment to say something. Did you want to speak tonight?
I am actually I'm trying to multitask an awful lot because I'm folding laundry at the laundromat as we speak. So in another town. So I'm listening for now. And usually I thought public be heard was at the end. ZRC meeting was really tough. That was without quorum. So there was a lot of confusion. So maybe this is my public be heard. There was a lot of confusion from folks with the crossover, who to speak with, about their complaints, and without the quorum, there are going to be some fees due April 1st, that kind of stuff. I know that's separate, but what my tie-in with that statement is, it's kind of what I always say. Just that I wish there was some kind of summit conversation where committees, commissions could all sort of come together, have a more in-depth conversation, and here, hi, have a more in-depth conversation, and maybe have something more uniform as how contact happens, how recordings happen, and just communication in general. There's just a lot of the same blah 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 with frustration, and it's just getting heavier right now, while we have these like the surprise fees going on, and then everybody gets angry, and then you hear the same things over and over. So
yeah, you're talking about
the
short-term rental fees. Is that what
and I kind of had a different view. I attend the ZRC meetings, and there were some technical difficulties in the beginning, and but there were technical difficulties from people who had never attended the meeting, and they had posted that online. But we also didn't have Ed, we didn't have Jude at that meeting, and we only have 4 members right now. There are 2 open seats, so we only had Laura and Connor, and it's kind of like town board, it's like 2 vote one way, 2 vote the other way, or feel one way in the ZRC, but it's sort of like the town board. It's like a 3-2 situation. So it feels like this one-sided conversation when they weren't there. Were they having a technological difficulty?
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But these people have to make a payment before April 1st.
Right.
Everyone's up in arms, and I don't like to see anyone up in arms. It's that open communication that I'm always, that transparency. That's my thing. It's not that I think anyone is necessarily trying to do anything nefarious here. I think there are a lot of really great ideas. Sometimes I don't agree with like 80% of something in someone's mind, but then it's like that 20% is brilliant, and they could work together, and then I'll hear that same little chatter from another committee or commission, but those people aren't talking. And then in the end it all goes through the town board. But it's when you have someone who's creating policy from from a committee or commission. And then voting upon it with a 3-2 vote, it's almost like, what's the point of even wasting our time with these meetings if we already know where the vote's gonna go? It
All right,
seems like the
Sarah,
theme.
thank
All
you
right,
very
but that's,
Yeah.
anyway, I really appreciate your meetings and thank you for
Okay, all
the
right.
transparency here. Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
that's it.
Okay.
All right. You don't have to watch me do laundry anymore. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
I can figure that out.
Yeah.
There we go.
Next, we have review and approval of the February minutes. Does anyone have any comments?
Yeah, I move that we adopt them. They look good.
Yeah. Second.
Thank you.
I second.
He held up a high standard for me.
Good job, John.
Great job.
Yeah.
All right, so on to current business. To sum up what the outreach committee has been doing, and in fact, the entire committee worked on this. We had our listening sessions a few weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Mm.
And I thought they
Was it
went very well.
Last week. Yeah.
The week before last, right?
Was it? I thought it was last week.
That was
Hey,
last
whatever.
week.
Yeah.
Weren't they gonna send you a report?
So they did send us that page summary, which Rebecca's going to share for me because I have hopeless tech skills and I can't do screen sharing. I don't know why. So
Shall you want to do that now? Are you ready for
yeah,
that?
that'd be great.
Alrighty, let's pull this up 1 sec.
Did you send it around to us?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
I have been really busy the
fine.
past couple days.
Fine.
I'm sorry.
I just no, I don't mind. I just want to make sure I didn't
No, you
miss it.
didn't miss it. Nope. So this was HRNA's summary of the major themes that came out of our listening sessions. And I agreed with these. And the outreach committee did review this last week with HRNA. We had our bi-weekly meeting with them. So the major themes that we identified were Woodstock's unique cultural heritage and identity. It is an artistic community with unique neighborhood characteristics that everybody wants to preserve and cultivate. And then the affordable housing need was identified by everyone that it's a critical need and we need it especially for artists in the service industry, seniors and families. And then a bunch of people, particularly business owners, on the second day, I thought, identified the importance of economic sustainability and that there is a strong link between housing and economic well-being. As I think we might have discussed, the idea of sustainable growth. And then the environmental considerations, which are top of mind for all of us and for the community, and the idea that we can come up with some building typologies that will respond to the community's context and the infrastructure. And then lastly, the community perception, which can be negative around housing, but if we heard from a bunch of people, if we can encourage people to attend our meetings, to understand what all of the issues are, to hear success stories, I think we can help change it. So, but that's one of our major goals in this, creating this community engagement playbook. Anybody want to comment on the listening sessions or anything else around that?
I'll just say I only went to the first one.
Well,
And I thought it was really, really excellent. I definitely heard from some new voices and different segments of the community who have not been involved in what's been going on with these committees. And that was also very helpful because they, brought sort of a fresh view. And also a lot of the concerns, as you can see from these notes that came out of it, that I think there's a lot of shared views, values, however you want to describe it, and that's very encouraging to me.
exactly. Yeah, feel like most people were on the same page, honestly. So that was very encouraging and very positive.
I think it was
Um,
helpful. One of the conversations I think you had, Catherine, with someone, I think sort of highlighted that while a lot of people are aware of this situation and crisis, there are so many people in Woodstock that aren't aware that this is an issue right now. And I think it's really, definitely a goal for us, in our outreach to educate the community on what's going on, that this is an issue that we're trying to solve and that we are trying to get community input as well. So it's kind of a, messages going out and messages coming in, and let's work together to make a solution. So I think, the outreach and education of what's going on in the community, I think is going to be, very, very important.
Sorry. I don't know how to make this mute.
Okay. All right, so I had a long conversation with Kai last week, and we were talking about the deliverables in the contract with HRNA and the timing for those. We had thought we were going to try to have a meeting, a community workshop meeting at the end of April, but then I started to worry about that because I don't think we'll have everything together by then. And we want to make sure we have a good turnout. So Kai agreed with me, and we're going to see if we can push it to June, maybe. The problem is that, the other problem is that the community center is never available. I spent so much time last week with the town clerk trying to figure out open days, so it's very difficult. Anybody has any other ideas about where we can meet? Deborah?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I don't know its availability, and it would depend on the days of the week. But back in the day, we used to actually have meetings at the Woodstock Elementary School,
Oh,
and that was really good. Francesca,
Yeah.
you might remember some of those.
Mhm.
And on a variety of issues. They have the space. I don't
Right.
know what the process is, but I would explore that.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Have to deal with.
Also suggest the Woodstock Jewish congregation
Ah,
on Saturdays or Sundays or at night. I mean, there's stuff going on there, but not all the
Right.
time. And it's a really big space with folding
Mhm.
chairs.
oh, that's a good idea too.
Other thing I would suggest, although I don't know anybody there, but could ask the director of the film festival to introduce me at Woodstock Playhouse if they're not having anything there.
But they
Maybe
have fixed seating, no?
Yeah, but
what?
it's huge. It's a theater.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge. It's fixed seating, but it's, oh, you don't want to do
Well,
presentations.
if it's a workshop, it
Round
would be,
tables.
yeah.
Oh,
need
Never
tables.
mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just say a bit more about what the goal of the event is?
Well, that is why I want to postpone it, because I'm not absolutely clear on that at this point. I don't think we've had enough time to assimilate the focus groups and then come up with the agenda for this meeting.
What is the meeting? It's like an open call to anyone who wants to come to talk about the agenda that we're going to set, or I'm not just even the general idea of that. Is that what it is?
Yeah, they want to do the proposal is what's in the contract basically is to do a community workshop around housing. And how can we address people's concerns? Basically the same questions we were talking about in the focus groups, but at a larger scale, and then to have really good answers to all of those concerns and to figure out how to workshop that, because that's the part I'm not clear about either.
So, I just wanted to say, if I could, Catherine, John, I think, we've had different meetings at different times associated with, actions that the town was considering, or a public hearing, or, the housing committee has done that in the past, but now we're kind of in a different phase, and we're reaching out more broadly than we have before. And I think the idea is to engage more of the community in a different type and maybe a more constructive conversation, so that we can actually establish a direction for the town to take to address the issues that have, that already from the small focus group clearly rose to the top. And we haven't been able to do that. And so having this consultant to kind of help us structure that conversation, will, you know, they're, I guess, not part of the community, but their expertise can
Mhm.
help us to facilitate that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, like all of the themes like that we just showed on that previous slide, we'd like to figure out how to expand on those and get people to engage in them. And you know, take ownership, honestly. Lisa?
I spoke to Rachel actually because I ran into her the other night at a thing, and she had more to say that she felt like she didn't get to in the focus group. And one of the things was about like creating a sustainable community space. So kind of like the model that you were looking at where it's like a few buildings and then there's like a community farm, and
Mhm.
she's also interested in exploring more sort of green and, you know, environmentally friendly off-griddy kinds of options. But what I thought was so cool was what's happening in Port Jervis with these veteran housing. Apparently the kids from Boise's or Boyce's, I don't know how you say it,
Mhm.
they're going to be building these tiny homes for veterans. They've got the money from the state and Pat Ryan, and they're providing like 100 houses or something. And they anticipate this happening very quickly. And, you know, I'm always looking at new sort of housing solutions and ideas. There's so many things that one could build that are really inexpensive. I mean, really inexpensive.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I get that we have to find a place to do all of that, but I just feel like if it's less about like big development and more about a community thing, and then this idea of like bringing people together, maybe that's where like it could take a village to actually do something.
Right.
I think on that, in that vein, something I've been thinking about a lot, just because of all the the Woodstock, the development on Xena Road business that's been going on that I've been hearing more and more about, is that, Catherine, I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with the Woodstock Land Conservancy, but we have talked a lot about how important it is to preserve land, but we have to find a way to do both. And maybe the way is to have some kind of partnership with them where we say, hey, we'll preserve 500 acres, but let's take 20 and build affordable housing for workers. I don't know if to me right now, it just feels like we're alienated and it's not a mutual thing. Maybe Deborah, you've had experience with
Deborah's
this.
had more experience than I.
Yeah, so just full disclosure, my husband's on the board and was president for 10 years. I hasn't been president since 2008, so it's been a while. But and he on his own has really been in Kirk Ritchie and I had multiple meetings with the Land Conservancy during the development of zoning, but also subsequently I think, Catherine, that session we went to at Mohawk back in November,
Yep.
the executive director of the Land Conservancy was there, and there is conversation, albeit limited with them, or with of them, to look at housing in conjunction with open space. But I do agree that there ought to be more of a sense of we're in this together than we're on opposite sides. And how we get there will be really interesting to just cultivate. And I
Right.
think we can, but I think we have to think about, you know, maybe that is a conversation with them directly.
Well, maybe it's having one of the tables at the community meeting being a workshop on marrying conservation and development.
There you
I don't
go.
know. Just seems like something those Save Woodstock people, you know, they're all about saving land, but they don't offer any solutions for the people who need housing. And to me, this is just a conversation that should happen.
Red Hook might have something to learn from. I was looking at their new development and they bought 300 acres, I think.
Yeah.
They kept
Yeah.
12 or 20, and then they worked with Scenic Hudson or some land conservancy and some farmers to try to return some to agriculture and some to conservation. And so
Mm.
that's kind of exactly what Sabina was just talking about. And I don't know if
Who
there's
is that, John? That was a
That's
rough.
the city of Red Hook. There's a
Hook.
link
Oh,
to the
right, right,
articles in the
right.
thing I prepared.
I
so-
read that. Yeah, that was very
The-
interesting.
Yeah, the supervisor of Red Hook came and spoke at that Mohonk conference.
Yeah,
And he was extremely compelling.
Yeah,
And
Think
he,
about, you
one of
know,
the things he spoke about actually was the need to have money on hand.
right.
So that's something I want to talk about at the end of the meeting with the community housing fund, but
Yeah,
but the thing that I think is relevant here for our discussion of the outreach committee, as it seems to me, I don't know if we have the capacity to do this, but it would be nice to start educating people in the community about what other communities are doing and how they're getting there. I feel
Mhm.
like that kind of creates a sense that this isn't, you know, us being out there doing something weird, but it's rather us trying to kind of get in the game of what the
Right.
communities that are like us are doing. And I think that there seems to be a lot of examples that you can uncover with a lot of work. I don't know how many more are out there, but just to kind of write them up and talk about how they get funded and what what kind of workforce housing is the case in Red Hook, but others might do senior
Right.
housing, others do different things. I just feel like that's one thing that could be in each issue.
Deborah?
yeah, I mean, this is a capacity issue, and I sometimes I have wild ideas and I ought to just keep my mouth shut, but um there are people who are involved in these things who have expressed an interest in, you know, coming to Woodstock and speaking with a group. So maybe that's something that could be looked into, to have either someone from Red Hook, Steve Rosenberg, who's running this program with Rebecca Crimmins. I'm a former colleague of mine from Scenecutson, where I used to work. And, you know, they've reached out, they want to educate the land trust, they want to educate the community. So while they can't go everywhere all the time, maybe there's a way, since they see that we're doing so much to try and move in this direction, that an invitation from us might be timely.
Mhm.
And just, you know, to just kind of, because it'll attract people, I think, who would otherwise perhaps be skeptical.
Mm.
well, that's an interesting idea for a different kind of event, in addition to the community meeting, to have
Right.
like that film series that's going on right now, but
Yeah.
just to have an evening of housing ideas and have people from various places. I think that's a great idea. And
Mhm.
have somebody from the Conservancy. I mean, I think, anyway.
I
love that
can
idea.
also, Kai sent around, I think it was last week, links to videos of all of the speakers at that Mohonk conference.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
Well,
So I'm a little behind on my email, sorry, but I will send that around to everyone.
That's
Um,
excellent.
Yeah, because those are really great. And
Just one other thing I want to say, because I've been working on something with Bill, and I know that there's tremendous amount of technology issues right now because of the, you know, all the work going on at Como, but he really is working on it so that there'll be more ability to do different kinds of presentations and meetings.
oh, good.
Um, and so I think we should, you know, continue to think about how we could utilize that going forward in conjunction with the town.
Will it be easier to have hybrid meetings then? Sorry, that's a little off topic, but okay.
Or Zoom, or do it all Zoom, which isn't
Okay.
always so great,
Yeah, yeah.
but it could.
Rebecca?
Yeah, and just going back to the, John, your idea, and Sabina about, showcasing some of these things that are happening semi-locally. I mean, we could do it at whatever the next, community meeting is. We could, and I'm thinking like something sort of simple, almost like science fair style. You've got the tri board, maybe we could print up some photos and some bullet points and just have like a little bit like of a, people can walk through it and see some examples in real life. And maybe we could even have some place for them to like put comments like, what do you think about this? What do you like about it? What do you not? What questions do you have about this kind of a development? And it could sort of be something that people could interact with, at whatever meeting we're doing in June. So I think, John, a lot of the research that you've done and put together, and we'll talk about today, I think is great information. We can just put it in a different way to present it for people to really kind of see what's going on around this area.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah.
I think though, we can't underestimate how much work it is to prepare for something like this. I don't
It's
think
true,
there's any
yeah.
possible way we could get it done by April 30th. So,
Yeah.
We could write a paragraph or two about one place that's doing something for the next, I call it an issue, but the newsletter that goes out, and try to, if one of us did one, and really just a paragraph or a long paragraph, one of us did one, we do one every 6 months.
yeah.
And that's probably something we could fit into our capacity.
Mhm.
Or providing links inside the newsletter to just show other examples of how, like, these are some of the models we're looking at. What do you think? You could even have like a box where people could check off, or, for some kind of way to do because we also talked about doing a chipmunky, whatever that thing is called, chipmunk, whatever, one of those, yeah, like the
MailChimp.
survey thing. Chipmunky, I don't know. It's, the survey thing.
Survey, okay, yes, so that was something, so Kai and I, we combed through the contract last week because for some reason, every time I bring something up to Frances in a meeting, she's like, oh, we're not doing that. And I'm like, we're not? And so I asked Kai to send me the contract, and there is an online survey. in
Made
the
to be
contract.
broken, right?
Yeah.
So annoying.
So, and Kai suggested when we were talking last week, maybe we put the community workshop at the end of our work with the consultant, and then we're build up to it. One way is to do an online survey and say, find out what everybody else thought, come to the meeting, because I think that would get people to come. So they should be working on a survey. We just have to figure out the exact content of the survey.
Do we have a mailbox that's related to the newsletter? Like, do we have a mailbox?
We have the town email address, which is housing@woodstocknewyork.org, which is something I check every other day.
So maybe we could say, like, voice your comments, if you have ideas, then they can send them. And, if there's links for some of these examples, I think people would be much more attracted. Because, like, talking to Rachel, I don't think she, everyone looks at that thing that Tamika lives in, or,
Yeah.
or projects, and they have like really bad ideas about what this could look like. And I think the zoning law descriptions imply a lot of different, like 5-story buildings, multiple cars, like all of that is like, no. So if there are
That's
these more
zoning.
sort of community-based projects, it might link the optics would
Yeah,
change.
to see, people need to visualize it. That was one thing that one person said on the second day. She said, this is a really visual community, and if you give people visuals to respond to, that will be helpful. So
I just feel like one thing, I think everything, I agree with what you're saying, but I think timing is important here because I feel like the way you visualize a project depends on where it goes. And if you don't have some sense of that when you're thinking about it, what if some lot would become available in central Woodstock, the way I would think about those different modalities would be quite different than if it's in a quite rural area that's not yet developed, that's farther from town. So you just want to make sure and have control over the conversation enough about these alternatives to have a meaningful dialogue with people about them.
right.
So it's not only like, do you like this housing idea, but if so, where in town
Where
would
would
it
you
be
like it?
appropriate? Yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
the important two parts of that question. Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe we mentioned MailChimp. I think we try to do a monthly newsletter. I mean, could we do a feature of the month of
Mhm.
this very thing? Like every month we kind of do a little write up with some photos and maybe a link to some of these projects and developments that are going on, just to give people a flavor. And then if you do want feedback, I mean, we could do maybe a simple Google survey. We have to figure out how, what account it would be tied to if we wanted to ask, what do you think of this? What do you like or not like about it? And if you like it, where in town do you think it would go? And just kind of try to get some feedback on those things on a monthly basis might be something we could try to do.
Yeah.
I also think that in addition to what people want, it's to help them understand and help us understand how do you get there. I mean, it's so confusing to me right now.
Right.
Like again, looking at the Red Hook example, they've had this tax that we haven't been collecting that has created a fund that they could generate because it was going to agriculture and conservancy as part of the project, and we don't have that, you know. And Rhinebeck seems to have just partners with the developer, and I don't know if what they donated. That wasn't so clear to me, but to try to understand and then to educate people about here are the pathways that you get there, because I don't think people are just concerned about what the
Right.
modalities look like, but they're worried about the finances and the role of the town and whether the town's doing things it has the capacity to do, and who gets partnered with and what kind of say does the town have over it after that partnership occurs. And
Right. It was interesting, no one brought up the financial implications at the listening sessions, not that I heard anyway. For
but
me,
there
that's like my
wasn't a
number one
completely
concern.
unbiased group at those listening sessions, you know. There's other people in
Yeah.
town who are going to be very concerned about that, and
Mhm.
they're going to have a voice too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay.
So what's our next step on the meeting? Do you want any of us to research these places or dates or?
Well, I think I need to circle back to Kai and figure out the timing. Francis he sent an email late on Friday, and then she was sick. And she did say we could be flexible on the timing. So I think I need to have another conversation with Kai about what the best timing will be.
Okay.
And then we can start. Yeah, if we want to start, I could definitely use help reaching out to either the elementary school or the Jewish congregation.
There's also the church right in the town square. I don't remember the name of it. It's a very old, nice looking building right next to the circle. And I don't know if they have a meeting
The
space.
Dutch Reformed.
You know what? Actually, that's where I do Meals on Wheels every week. And there is a huge room in the basement.
Right, I've been there. Yeah.
You've been there. They have tax sales and they do have tables and chairs and things. So that might be another, it's not as pretty as the other two spaces probably, but, and the parking there is very tough. There's a
Yeah.
very small parking lot. So that would be a challenge,
Mhm.
actually, that I'm just thinking out loud. Both the
Well,
elementary.
you can park in the municipal parking lots.
Yeah.
We could encourage people to do
More
that.
likely they're gonna come.
The elementary school might be good because it's so close to the center of
Yeah.
town.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think that's right. It would have parking and proximity, whereas the Jewish place is pretty far out and they would
Yep.
have parking.
Yeah.
Mhm. So I will pin down the time frame and then I'll come back to you guys to help finding the location.
Okay.
I'll see if I could find a contact at the school.
Okay.
Couldn't I ask that guy at the listening session who kept talking about how he could be on the board?
Rob Kernet, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I bet he
let's
can help
start
us.
with him. Yeah, he was very helpful. Yeah. Okay, we should probably move on. The planning subcommittee did not meet this month, but we do need to meet again. Also, Kai was very tied up with launching the Housing Action Fund for the county, so he couldn't work with us the past couple of weeks, although I was very grateful that he came to both of the focus groups. And now this week he seems to be focusing on us again. So we'll have to set up another subcommittee meeting on that. But in the meantime, John did all of this amazing research on the typologies and modalities, and I think we could just launch into that because that is connected to planning. Deborah.
I wanted to ask just because I'm doing a lot of walking around the village these days, just as a break from Cooper Lake, which they've built it up and it's not as much fun to walk around as it used to be. But anyway, and I'm just noticing a lot of properties that have space that could accommodate cottages or ADUs. And I feel like I don't know how we get at that in this planning, you know, looking at properties, because I know there's always this, well, look at the town properties first and, you know, who's for sale, but my goodness, there I feel like we're missing out on an effort to really do I mean, it's technically, they call it infill development. Some people
So,
don't like that.
exactly. Mhm.
And they kind of, you know, but don't call it that. If you look behind, well, look behind Maria's Bazaar, just as an example, up against the town parking lot. There's property there that is, you know, there's obviously some buildings, but then there's some areas that just are not built where you could nestle in additional structures that could create housing.
Mhm.
And I don't know how we get that on the table, but I would love to see, you know, a calm and cool conversation about looking at some of these other ways to, you know, consider where housing could be built. Maybe that's a housing alliance thing. I don't know.
I think that it's a great idea. And I just am thinking that probably the only thing that limits people from doing that is the expense of actually, making an ADU, the construction costs, because of course they're so high now. But it's something that I've considered myself. And I think that incentives could be provided by the town in the form of real tax breaks, the assessment. For example, maybe if you put in an ADU for 5 years or whatever it is, you wouldn't be taxed on it. And I think that that would go an awfully long way to making people at least look at their property in a different way, especially people who have some space. And there are plenty of people who would like a little bit of extra rental income. And we're not talking about low income housing, as you said, we're talking about worker housing. And it's just such a good idea to use your existing space. Infill development, you're right, is the kiss of death. But but the concept is really very good, and especially for Woodstock, because we do have these properties with space.
Right.
So kudos.
I feel
Thanks.
I feel like it's a really, really smart idea, and that there's an example in the packet that I sent around of Ithaca doing this on a lot. They called it the Aurora
Right.
Project.
It's fine.
And there's also a related idea is to see if there's properties that could somehow are in disrepair and that are susceptible to a buyout or something by the town or by a partner of the town to like the Housing Alliance to try to bring it up to speed and make it, you know, accessible to workers. And what joins both of those together, I think, is this idea that we shouldn't just be thinking about big developments somewhere, but we really, if you can do this in little pieces, it can make a big difference and be widely supported at the same time.
Yep. And I like that phrase, pocket neighborhood.
That's in the Missing Middle book.
I know I saw a posting about the Bank of Greene County offering like low interest loans for ADUs. I think that was with the Woodstock Housing Alliance. I mean, that's some kind of an incentive, but maybe not. Maybe there's more needed to help people really do that.
So I'm not sort of unrelated, but I'm looking into farm worker housing as part of my job. And one of the things that I've identified are these pre-manufactured but really nice cottagey looking ADUs. In fact, I'll send a link around. Maybe we can include that, like $120,000 or $150,000 for that, and then of course there's site costs and stuff. But anyway, the idea is that there are some really decent options that can bring down the expense of doing these types of buildings. And I think that we ought to have in our toolkit, or you know, whatever, these different
Our housing plan.
or housing plan, right?
Yeah, it could include ways to facilitate that kind of construction.
Yeah, and John's work, John, I've so appreciated reading everything that you put
Mhm.
together. It's really thoughtful and really kind of gets the juices flowing. Yeah.
But just to keep the juices flowing going based on what you just said, one way, also building on what Francesca was talking about, to facilitate the ADU is people don't know how to do it. Most people haven't built a house. And if the town could provide some sort of infrastructure or some sort of expertise, maybe through the Housing Alliance, maybe through local volunteers or something, maybe by identifying panelized units that, show up, but that are not, trailer parks, but are rather really, the beautiful things they're building, in a factory and bringing it to your house. And so if we could create incentives, financial incentives, but also cut the costs of figuring out how to do it, that might also facilitate people trying to do this in
Mhm.
their existing yards.
I sent Catherine a link today. Somebody this morning on the phone told me about, you can now make a house on a 3D printer, which I did not know. And some of them are very low cost. It's really incredible. So if you just Google it, you'll see a lot of links come up. But it's fascinating what's happening in very low cost construction.
There's
But
also
there are 3D printers that make houses.
I know.
there's also like this whole Earthship movement, which is using like tin cans,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they're completely sustainable and off grid, and they work and they're almost free. I mean, to me, to pay $150,000 to put somebody on my property and like make enough to pay for it, that doesn't make any sense. Like the rent would be what my mortgage would be to do that. And I can't get a mortgage. So like they won't give me one. So I'm completely out of that. And most creative people are self-employed and can't get a mortgage. So yeah, I mean, I see that working for some people if you have a lot of extra dough, but there's somebody, like there's us in the middle that can't really do that. So there's other ways. I mean, I'm thinking these sort of more creative and sort of Woodstocky ways, like these
Mhm.
Earthship things.
Mhm. Yeah, just to follow up on, if you see something that you think is interesting, send it to the whole group. That would be helpful to me because feel like I'm doing a lot of email these days. So sorry. That's all right.
One of my frustrations on the committee is there are a lot of emails and they're about different subjects and they come all through the time. And I just have a hard time keeping track of everything. But if you wanted me to just like keep adding to this document, send me an idea and I can just make a slide.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
I'll send you the 3D printing.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, do we want to take a look at the presentation? We're getting close on time, but maybe we could spend 15 minutes on it.
Sure.
I think Rebecca.
If I could just say one kind of big picture thing that
Sure.
came out of trying to organize what I thought the questions were, and just that leading to more and more questions, and is that to me, as I said in the slide, the question's too abstract now about what kind of place we want, because we don't really have a place for it and we don't have a modality to get there. And what I came out of it thinking that I need the most personally, and maybe others have this, but is the how do we get there idea? Like ultimately, what are we going to be trying to propose for the town to consider? What are the kinds of sets of alternatives? And they include so much more than these modalities. And also, I think that one thing that I was convinced of when I was reading about this is once you have a project, if it's going to be a development project, I'm not talking about building a single unit on an existing plan, you need an architect or a planner or someone to actually do it in a way that people are going to be happy with and to make it make sense. And so how much work we want to put on the different options and stuff right now isn't totally clear to me, but I'd love to know like how Red Hook put together the money, or how Rhinebeck put together the money, or how Crescent City put together the property, and how did they create relationships with builders, and like how do you do this, right? And so to me, that's where the biggest puzzle is right now.
Mhm.
And what
Well-
can we do in New York? Because if you look at a lot of the examples from out of state, they had these state funds, which now New York is considering that could support these things. But I don't know what they can do in New York right now. And so anyway, I just wanted to keep an eye on not getting the cart before the horse. And for me, the horse is, how do we go through the different, what are the different stages and what are the different strategies for getting through them?
Right. Well, that is supposed, that is what the housing action plan is supposed to tell everyone. It's a tall order, it's a lot to figure out.
But to me, one way to get started, and it sort of happened for me a little bit, it's like just how have other towns actually done the nuts and bolts of this? Like,
Mhm.
how did they get the property? How did they get the developer? How did they get the design? And
Mhm.
start putting together sort of a list of options for the different pieces of it. You can buy
Right.
land, you can buy part of the land and sell it back to the conservancy. You can take existing land, you can do it in an existing lot. I mean, there's lots of different ways. And so
Mhm.
there's so many dimensions that it gets feeling overwhelming. And so I think a
Yes,
challenge is
it's
to make
very
it feel
overwhelming.
small. You got to make it feel
Yeah.
small. And so you got to pick a piece of it
Mhm.
and say, this is, the
Right. Well, I
options
think-
for.
Yeah, the purpose of the financial feasibility study is to do exactly that, to take one piece of property, pick a housing type, and how do you pay for that? It's going to be a financial model.
No, but is it going to tell us where the money comes from, or is it going to tell us how much it's
I'm
going to cost?
hoping it will. I hope they'll say these are the sorts of grants you could get. But
These are the developers you can talk to.
yeah, but some of it has to be based on the income that the property generates. That's what a pro forma tells you. You've got this many units, where you bring in this much of rent. These are your costs. This is the cost to build it. That's a financial model for this. That would be a starting point for us to begin to understand how to do this.
So when are we what's gonna be necessary to generate that document?
So we need to meet with Kai again to review our list of potential properties.
So it's going to be only assuming that it's town property, or is it also could be?
It could be something that gets purchased. That's why he wanted us to look at other, properties are on the market, or maybe potential partnerships with nonprofit organizations in the community that own land. That's why we were sort of thinking through all those options.
And they'll have a list of the ways different places. We don't need to do this because they're going to show us how all other communities are different options for financing these things.
Well, they're not gonna, they're supposed to be researching messaging in other rural communities. What are the messaging campaigns that worked in other rural communities? There's nothing in the contract about providing, stories about how financing worked. I think a lot of it is when you choose a developer and they figure out the financing.
But you have to figure out the parameters of the negotiations with the developer. Like, what can you offer? Like some of the projects I looked at, they offered to do all the infrastructure. The town paid for that, and that was what they gave the developer. They might give them tax cuts. They give them 50 years of controlled rent, and then it goes out of that. There's so many different ways.
Exactly. There's a million different ways. It's like getting a movie done in Hollywood, right, Sabrina? That's what I learned in my time in Hollywood. It's like, wow.
I think this is harder than any
Yeah,
film I've
it'd be harder.
But I wonder, John, I don't think it's a terrible idea, and maybe we should wait until we're more further along, but for somebody to talk to the person who started the Martha's Vineyard group, or somebody who was in charge of the Red Hook development. I'm sorry?
That's a community land trust, the Martha's Vineyard project.
Okay, so the Red Hook
have a community
development.
land trust, yeah.
But
But the Red Hook supervisor would be great to talk to. I'm gonna send around tomorrow, send you all the links, because he's the one that spoke at the Mohawk conference, and he
Okay.
said in his speech how he did it.
oh,
And
good.
yeah, but he had a fund where he was collecting money. So when
From
the
the town, say the tax.
taxes, I don't know what else, like, I'm thinking, if we had a fund, if we sell some of these properties that the town owns that are kind of useless to us, we could put the funds from those sales into a community housing fund. And so he said it when he was speaking at Mohawk, he had this money saved in a fund, and then when this big parcel became available, he was able to buy it. But he's a very proactive supervisor. So another thing they talked about at Mohawk was having those proactive community leaders. And they need to be kind of financially savvy. So it's hard.
And
I
it's,
will
also,
say
if you think about that model, we're just going to be doing this in the future. If we have to save up somehow, could develop a vehicle, like we could implement the tax they implemented if we followed the model they followed of
Right.
buying large lots, but
Mhm.
it would take a while to have any money in it. And so,
it will. So our goal, I mean, none of us is going to be on this committee in 10 years, but our goal would be to set things up for the next committee as best as we can.
But
Just
maybe
trying to put things
that
in.
also means that, there should be two parallel tracks here. And one is following up on Deborah's idea of how do you facilitate things that are smaller scale on particular spots in the town? And how do you pursue a bigger project that's going to take more time and more money and more thought that's outside of town? And it doesn't seem like those have to be either or. They could be two tracks that you're trying
Exactly.
to.
That's the thing about housing. It's like you need to do every single way that you can, basically. So
if we like the idea of trying to figure out how to facilitate the Deborah idea, what would be the next steps that we could do?
well, I think we'd have to identify those properties and who owns them. I'm sure every piece of land in Woodstock is owned by someone, and you can go on the parcel viewer and see who owns it.
I'm not sure though, Catherine, if you want to actually identify the properties, maybe what you want to do, like Francesca said that they might be willing to do something like this. There might be a lot of people who want to do it that we don't know about. And
Right.
Also, you could talk to the assessor and see what it is that perhaps the town is prepared to offer, because that's going to impact the people who will be able or willing to do that kind of development. What is in it for me? That's what people will be thinking. And you may not get anything set in stone yet, but you could get a good idea as to what the town would be prepared to do, whether that's an exemption of some kind, for a certain number of years, something like that. So I don't know if you do it instantly, but it certainly would talk to the assessor's office as part of your process.
Aren't there like so many older people wind up giving their land to the land conservancy? So if there was a way, and that's just because they want to keep Woodstock green, but if there was a way to market the concept of providing housing as opposed to more green spaces, or using part of the green space so that, because there's a lot of ways to like lock your property or put it in a trust, so that nobody develops it, but maybe there's like an incentive because they're not getting anything out of it. I mean, I guess some of them are selling the land back to the town or something. I don't know how it works. I just know that this through the ether, I've heard about this. But if there was some way to encourage these older folks who plan to, live and die here and want to preserve some of their land and like leave it in their name or whatever, that they could donate the land to this kind of a development to support the community.
Well, the Housing Alliance is set up to do that. Like they will take estate properties, or anyone can bequeath their land to them.
I think also what
Why isn't
Francesca said, I think it's another opportunity for this community meeting. We talked about having these tables with other developments. Maybe there's a table, how you can put an ADU in your small backyard and what are the possible benefits to you. This is how you can help. I mean, it's just a packet of information.
I want to remind everyone, we're not actually, this committee do not build anything.
Right.
That's not our job. Our job is to inform the community and help them make decisions and
Right.
to present options and recommendations to the town board. So
To
we're not,
encourage
we're
that
not
growth.
worrying about finding property to develop it. We're just saying, here's a way you could do it.
But I think it also kind of generates the interaction among the people in the community who might be considering that, and actually back to the Conservancy and having a table at the community meeting or however that's going to work. I just feel like there are people who donate to the Conservancy who do care about housing, who would like to engage in that conversation, and let's just see if we could facilitate that as part of the other parts of this whole picture, and then include that in our housing plan as these are some strategies.
Right. Yeah, and it's great that the Housing Alliance has been set up so that we can say, oh, and you know, here's how this could work. And we have this nonprofit organization that does this already. So.
But I think again, it still kind of keeps it apart. Like there's land conservation and housing. And what this group with the Mohonk program that we went to was all about was bringing those two together and having that conversation be between them, not separate. Right. And I think until that happens in Woodstock in particular, we're just going to continue to see these opposing, these poles, the polarization.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah.
Should we look at John's presentation? Did you want to look at John's presentation?
Yeah. Can we do that?
You want to look at it on the screen, or I mean, everyone could look at it. Do you want to ask questions about it or go through it? I'm not sure your preferences.
I have it open. It's just so great. I can't
Put
thank
it
you.
on the screen.
Yeah, Rebecca's good. Rebecca said she was set up to share it on screen.
Okay.
I'm happy to share, John, if I can flip through slides if you want, or if it's easier you.
I mean, I could share it myself, but
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to drive and highlight a few things, maybe, and you've got that, you can go for it.
go ahead and share it. I'm not finding it quickly enough. Oh no, here it is, right here.
Okay. Oh, great.
Is this shared now?
Yes.
Yep.
So I guess this first page is me just emphasizing this isn't anything the housing committee has done. This is just me trying to learn. And so I just put that in there because sometimes people misinterpret what's going on. What are housing modalities? And we've often talked about the types of buildings that are constructed, but I think it's also the way they're integrated with each other and the environment around them. And also, to me, there's the way they're constructed, which are actually connected to the way they're integrated. And, you know, when you talk about cheap alternatives to put up for workers and you don't think about sustainability, I think you're taking a very short-term view of economic sustainability, because if you put a little extra money in at the top, it's actually a lot cheaper for the person to live in because you just can almost totally eliminate the costs of utilities. And that's not a trivial thing. So anyway, I wanted to try to emphasize sustainability as we think about this. These were some of the dimensions of modalities that I thought about. Density, like if you have a place, how many units can you put on it? Its cost, and the cost has two dimensions. One, the cost to build it, but then as I just mentioned, there's the cost to operate it. And that's very important if you're trying to make things affordable. There's the aesthetics, and of course, density and aesthetics can work in tension with each other. So I think you need a real expert to figure that out. And then there's sustainability, and there's two dimensions of that typically, and one is embodied carbon. How environmentally friendly is the structure you're building? You can spray foam in a building and make it very highly insulated, but it's not going to be very environmentally friendly because spray foam is terrible, and it's also not going to be a very healthy house because it's going to invite mold. And then you care about the carbon footprint once it's done, and how you heat it and cool it, etc. Here's a list. I don't have to, I'll just let you guys look at it, of the different ways to think about increasing density. And these are pretty common, well-known things, but if you look at the missing middle, you know, what they're trying to emphasize there, and what I learned a lot from, is you're trying to make density fit in aesthetically by using footprints of buildings and outer design of buildings that are similar to what's around it, or the other things together. And so you can do that with duplexes or mansion houses, maybe townhouses if you're in an area where you can share walls. And the other thing I would mention is that these different modalities affect the environmental cost of the building. If you can have structures that share walls, that's a good thing. So cottage housing might be nice, but it's probably the most inefficient way of doing the what's it called, the utilities, you know,
Right.
the
They
sewage
can't
and
share
stuff,
the
but also the
plumbing.
heating and the cooling.
Mhm.
So then you guys sent me stuff, and I just tried to code it under the different kinds. So there was something that looked like a mansion house to me. It sort of looks like houses, but you can tell there's
Yeah,
different.
it's a triplex, actually. See the diagram there?
Yeah.
That's a triplex.
So that's an example of an attractive house looking building that has pretty high density.
Right, and a community garden.
Yeah. And here's some others that were sent to me that are more in the duplex. This one here looked like it could be a quadplex, and up and down and left and right.
Mm.
Yeah, it is.
And here's some that have the shared walls. And it looks like it's integrated in a neighborhood, you know, that probably has houses in it. You don't really see that, but that's sure what the street looks like and the building next to it. So if you actually, you know, being on this housing committee makes you drive around Woodstock or walk around Woodstock
Yes.
differently, and you see there's a lot of duplexes and multi-house places in town.
Yep.
This is the closest someone sent me to something that looked like cottage houses. It's really not quite there. You can't really tell if that's a separate house or if they're connected, but that's an example of putting a lot of houses next to each other.
I think it's called a cottage court,
Cottage court.
because it's got like this court in the middle. You see a lot of these in California, but I know Rebecca got this from the other place she was living in.
Yeah.
This is, I thought, was interesting because it's combining different styles in one continuous sort of unit. And so it looks like there's some duplexes, some single family homes in there, and that's pretty high density. Here's a barn conversion. And so there's some links here. The Go Logic, it's worth going there and seeing that they have these attractive looking modern style homes that range from like 900 square feet to 2,500 square feet. And so these are all what's called a passive house, which is really very high level of sustainability or energy or environmental consciousness. And they build them off site and they bring them and put them together on your property. And as you think about how you do modalities, there's places that pre-design the homes and then you just can buy them. And it's interesting that this started, I discovered, like before the Second World War, Sears was selling houses out of a catalog and you would buy it and it would show up. And now it's a little bit more advanced than that because they panelize it. They don't like send you a kit, but they build a house in maybe 10-foot wide sections and they come and they screw it together. And this can happen with their own designs, but you can also have an architect send them a design and say, here, make 20 of these or something like that. And that's a possibility. So I've kind of expressed this already, that the modality is going to depend on where it goes. What you would build behind a house in Woodstock would be different than what you would build on a road of woods in the woods that's never been built before. And to me, it said, well, ultimately, you're going to need an architect or some other person to help you if you have a situation like this, where I'm not talking about a pocket house in a neighborhood, but I'm talking about if you're trying to do like more of a subdivision or something.
Right.
It's going to take some
Well, the
really...
developer would hire an architect.
But I think that one thing I read, it might have been in Missing Middle, is that a good way to do it is for the town to hire the architect and to really control the conversation with the developer about what they want out of it, and for the developer to listen to the town's architect rather than to cede too much to the developer when you get to that point.
Right. I think it also depends on the town and the kind of staff they have. Yeah, some communities have paid planners who can do this stuff. For us, it's more volunteers, so we have to,
No, but if we had a contract with an architect who's, we paid to develop a site plan and the modalities or whatever.
Right. No, I'm just saying who does all that? That's the question.
Oh, who finds the architect?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, minor details, right?
The town board has so much, and they're the only ones who are paid.
Well, one thing I discovered, is there are these organizations, you guys probably, many of you know more about them than I do, that are trying to provide support for towns that are trying to do this. And I have links to a couple of ones that I found, but if there's any ones that we haven't heard of, and we can leverage there, and it doesn't seem like they cost anything always. So that's a slide that's coming up.
Okay.
As you know, I was kind of interested in this idea of how does a town do it? And so this was just an example. We don't need to go through these bullet points, but you can read them over about how a town in California, which was similar in size and kind of a rural town, but maybe a little bigger than Woodstock, how they worked with a RUBCO type organization. And so the organization purchased the land, and the city got $5 million from the state, and that's where the money came from. And then they did some other deals that you can see in here, but there was, this was something that's going on in Rhinebeck. There was issues of how you handle the cost and the annoyance of going through what would be the SECRA review here, and that's something that the town can try to help figure out. But I know that we wouldn't have the capacity to do that. Here's another one from a small town in Michigan, north of Grand Rapids. This is a college town, so it's probably more like New Paltz than like Woodstock, but at the same time, they built senior housing. And I thought it was interesting because it was easy to find information about, how did they figure out who got to go there and what they would pay and things like that. And then there's some links to these articles about Red Hook and Rhinebeck, and we've talked a lot about that already, so I won't add more. But the one thing I would emphasize about Red Hook is that they were focused on workforce housing, not senior housing, not, super low income housing, but people who have middle income, often two-family incomes, but they can't afford the town anymore. And so that's what they decided they wanted to focus on, and they're going to try to get 40 units. And I think Red Hook's pretty similar to Woodstock and the size of the town.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what's left is thinking about sustainability, and I've said some stuff that's already on this slide. But, there's 3 dimensions, and one is the environmental footprint of building the house. And the other is the environment. People talk now about there's a term that I'm forgetting, but it's the indoor environment, right? It's the off-gassing of stoves and the off-gassing of formaldehydes and the materials that you use, and you can build
indoor air quality.
Indoor air quality, yeah, that was the term. And then there's the carbon footprint once you're living in it, and those are all important. Sort of the gold standard is called the passive house standard, and there's information here about how you achieve a passive house. And basically, it's really high insulated. It's good orientation towards the sun, so you take advantage of the solar energy from the sun in the winter. You have to have indoor electric ventilation that's constantly filtering the air because the house is very tightly sealed. It has very good windows, and it's more expensive to build these. So there's some links to learn more about this, but it's hard to put up.
John,
Go ahead.
there is a, I'm pretty sure on Easton Lane, there's one of these houses. It was built about 10 years ago, I think, maybe a little bit more, but, and I think it's sold since then, but that was one of Woodstock's first passive houses and maybe the only one now.
No, John has one.
Oh, I should have known.
That's why he knows that.
No, we put a lot of thought into whether to have one, and it does
Sure.
cost more, but it pays itself off in a hurry. And if you can put in community solar, if you're in a development, that really helps a lot as well.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I put some, information about these because people often want to walk away from it when they see that it costs more upfront. But you don't, houses, passive houses also live longer as houses. They're really built to last because of the way they manage the moisture in the shell of the house, and they pay for themselves because your energy bills could be next to nothing. And so, anyway, going on, I found these random things. I guess that Crescent City thing didn't get moved, but the Rural Housing Coalition of New York I hadn't heard about, and it's trying to help people design, develop, finance, build, and manage affordable housing in rural New Yorkers. So that seemed relevant. So do we know about this, and have we checked what's there? Then there's this Hudson Valley Alliance for Housing and Conservation and the
Yeah,
Regional Plan
that's the one
Association.
we've been speaking about,
Yeah.
that hosted the conference, right, Deborah?
So I guess, as I was expressing my discouragement with how little I knew, and how do towns actually do this? Those seem like places you could turn to for advice, and how have people finance them? What are the different things that they've built? How have they used town-owned land? Have they purchased private land? Have they done pocket neighborhoods? To learn as much as we can about how people actually get it done seems to be useful. And then these are the things that Catherine circulated. These would be really helpful, it seems. One gives you money and one gives you kind of infrastructure
Right.
for doing this. And so whether that will go anywhere and how long it would take to be able to help the town, but it's a hopeful signal. And I think that was it.
And I was speaking with Francis and Kai separately about creating a community housing fund. And I mean, we can wait until the bill gets passed, or we could try to engineer it ourselves. Deborah.
So this is the kind of issue that I've been working on the last few years to get a town specific, so we don't have to wait for
Right.
the legislature to pass it for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to really push the town to move it.
Exactly. That's
And
what Kai was saying.
so that we can get the authority. And I also think we should ask the town board to pass a resolution supporting the legislation as well, because the
Right.
town does stuff like that, and that might be a good recommendation from the housing committee.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Just
And again, I'm repeating myself, but we could use the law that exists now. If you use the proceeds of the tax to do conservation, that could create the kind of partnership. And somehow Red Hook figured out a way to combine conservation with housing under this law. So I don't know how they did that, but
yeah, it's worth finding out how they did it. It was not so easy, according to the supervisor, actually. And I'm not sure. I think we'd have to explore how to actually do that, and if we can do that without additional legislation that's specific for our town. That's the problem, because it's a taxing authority and that has to be given by the legislature, and that's where it gets complicated.
Okay, well, we can keep researching this. But thank you, John. That's just an amazing amount of research and very succinctly and, communicated. Yes.
welcome.
Good job.
I was like, we can use this for the housing action plan. Just the points on sustainability would be really helpful.
I just feel like our challenge is to organize this so much different information and to make each project kind of small. Like,
Right.
trying to figure out if the town could create a tax credit for pocket neighborhoods is such a manageable thing that could make a difference. And so to me, it'd be, how could we figure out how to start the conversation at the town about how to structure this?
Right. Well, that's part of the zoning update, though. If you read the subdivision.
But I'm talking about creating something more than a zoning change. I'm talking about creating a financial
An incentive.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think those were in those policy recommendations,
Yeah.
Catherine, that the last year's housing committee presented to the town board. What happened to them? I don't know. They went to the town board and to all the committees in the town, and then that's where they are.
Right. I
We
think we
have to-
have to decide, I think once we finish our work with the consultant, we need to decide, you know, what are our priorities and what do we want to push on? But right now, I think we really need to focus on the rest of the deliverables with the consultant. So more to come on that. I just have to regroup with Kai and HRNA. And sort of pin them down on a timeline because it's been very vague up until this point about what should come next and when it should happen. So I will do that and then I will let you guys know. All right, I think that's it then. Anybody have anything else?
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Could I just, before you guys close, I
Yeah.
know, we did public be heard at the beginning, and I always like it at the end because this is where I come up with my questions. The reason is, we have so many different housing committees, and again, just going, back to, we have a lot of committees that don't talk to each other. I appreciate all the work. I do. It's such a complicated puzzle. And there are people who don't come to these meetings. I mean, look at the attendance. Who is it? Me and one other person. Again, last night we had 19 people at a meeting without a quorum. It's not a meeting. We're not going to have minutes. It's not going to be recorded and posted to YouTube like this one will be because we have a quorum. I do believe that was probably tech issues last night. So, you know, but the December 12th town board meeting, we're still at Como. Urena brought up, while she was saying on that, she brought up that this increase in the STR fee would be a good idea. Okay, it's understandable that there's a minimal increase or an incremental increase, but that it would bring, the increase that was suggested would bring this up to a grand total of $44,400. Where we're at now is like 150K, but what she was saying, the math did work out to 44,400. And that it would cover like all four bases there with additional funds left over. So it was kind of questionable. I don't even know who to ask about this stuff because it blends in my mind, and I show up. I try so hard to kind of follow the dots. You know,
what's the question you want to ask, Sarah? I'm just not clear.
Yeah, it's like we're talking about, there's a lot of things like, you know, we have to get the funding. If we're talking about hiring an architect, right? So if that would be an additional burden to the taxpayers, it's like we're paying another law firm right now. You know, I don't want to get into the politics of that. I won't.
Yeah.
I won't do that here. But it was suggested, you know, talk to the town board about that part. But we are limited to 8 people, 3 minutes for those public be heard. That's a really tough nut. I'm curious why we would not tax the ADUs for 5 years. Also, like in that same vein, with that STR fee exponentially without notice, and the remedy being, you know, let's just spread it out without public discussion. And that's not something you can really answer either. So it's like this round and round thing.
Policy.
I'm sorry?
The Housing Committee did not create the new policy on
No,
ADU.
I know, and that's the whole thing, but when you're making a decision or if they're making a decision and you're saying, let's push this through to the town board before this other decision is made, it's like, don't they directly affect one another? It seems like that to me when I'm looking at policy being made, and how taxes may be directly affected. Like if the board is voting 3-2 on either one of these, which is just the general vote, and you know, historically, where does it end? Where does it begin? It's just very circular. I like that we're looking at Red Hook as an example. That's great. But I'm just looking at quick notes. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
Sarah,
I don't
we're
want to
gonna
take too much
go. Like,
time.
you know, if you want to write me at the housing email address, I think you've written in the past. So feel free to write and I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can.
But it's just, if this is passed, would that not have an effect? Just while, you know, someone might be watching that out there who doesn't write in, because we're always asked to write in. But then if these boards, if these committees aren't talking to each other before something's passed, that would affect another committee and it can't be undone. But it does affect every single citizen, every community member here. And then, you know, I'm not getting answers to my own emails. I'm not you.
Right.
But, you know, when I'm writing to the town board, et cetera. So, you are very responsive. Yes.
All right, good.
That's not
good to
everyone.
hear. I'm doing my best.
No,
All right. Well,
but
thanks, Sarah.
when
We're
everything
gonna
is
end the meeting
directed
now,
to the
okay?
town board,
We're gonna end the meeting. Thank you so much for
we
coming.
can't rely on the town board to answer everything. We can't, like, there's too many housing related committees. It's blasted all over the front of our website. Everything has to do with housing, but it's all like, in the end, the responsibility goes to the town board. It's all redirected to the town board.
Well, they are the governing
it's
body
one-
for the town, so, and
I
we.
know.
are
So
recommending
if
to
all
you.
these, but if all the recommendations, you know,
Okay.
there's one person.
All right,
there's
good
one
night,
person-
everyone. Thank you so much.
All right.